28. I lowered to the ground, and the glaring white light erupting from my body penetrated my eyelids. My feet gently settled on the packed dirt surface. I blinked and took in my surroundings. My magic bag rested at my feet. You have died. You have lost all XP gained since your prior level. Level 20. 0 of 0 XP. Since you were KO'd by an outside force, you have resurrection sickness. Duration, 1 hour. A man stood before me with his mouth gaping. Torches hung on either side of the tunnel where it merged with the great room. Two figures' faces were shadowed by the flickering light as they stood just in front of the light sources. I eyed the one with dropped chin. Probert Mulk, human, level 18 fighter, disposition, neutral.
I wouldn't have believed it if I wasn't seeing it with my own eyes,
Mulk said.
By the light of Solara, I wouldn't.
He rushed over and ripped my daggers from their sheaths before I could react. As he did, he whispered,
Sorry about this. I wish there'd been another way.
I glared at him silently as shivers rushed up and down my spine. Sweat beaded on my forehead as my heart thumped in slow, heavy beats that pumped in my ears. My knees buckled. Then I dropped into the stone chair. Mulk's eyes flicked up and to the right. His lips moved in silent ripples. Then he addressed one of the men behind him, who wore plate from head to toe.
Mage is on the way.
The man nodded in reply. Then Mulk turned his gaze back to me. I gave one shadowy figure a quick glance, then turned my attention to his partner. Both were level 20. Both are Shadow Knights, an ACP class.
Your little trap at the cave entrance killed one of the Pyre's apprentices. The casters are none too pleased with you.
While hoping the apprentice died slowly, I threw a thought at my interface for a reminder while Mulk rambled on. Shadow Knight. Roll. DPS. Off tank. Where Marauders wear chain and deal more damage, Shadow Knights enjoy added survivability and can tank non-raid instances, lending themselves as great options for players who enjoy soloing difficult engagements. Shadow Knights can switch between Defender and Assaulter modes while in combat.
They're going to make me do things when they get here.
His words might have irritated me, but there was no goading in his tone. Instead, I sensed regret. It seemed a common theme of late. I theorized that my sparing the spy girl left him torn.
I tried to talk sense to you. If it's of any consolation, you made a lot of farmers and tradesmen 50 gold richer. All they had to do was camp outside and ensure you didn't leave until the governor's men could rally.
I ignored most of what he'd said because despite the nausea and chills from my resurrection sickness, his regretful tone sparked the inkling of an idea in my mind. When I spoke, my words came jittered by shivers.
I hope it will cover the expenses for your niece. That would be of some consolation. My niece?
His forehead wrinkled.
I don't know if you really mean it or if you're trying to buy favor, but it doesn't matter, Fowler. Even if I wanted to help you, I'm in no position to grant you mercy.
He glanced to either side, but didn't turn his head toward the knights behind him. Then he lowered his voice.
But if you mean it, it's almost enough to get her the help. Yes.
I forced a smile.
Good. And hey, don't worry. It's not like they can kill me.
I analyzed him. Probert Mulk. Human. Level 18 fighter. Disposition. Neutral.
Still neutral. Humph.
Party chat. Decini. Gemini? You've resurrected? Gemini. I'm here. Mulk is with me in the great room. 2 guards. Level 20 Shadow Knights. Decini. I want to help. Gemini. Don't freaking move. If they kill you, you'll have resurrection sickness. Mulk's tone remained low as he unknowingly interrupted my party chat.
I sense you mean it, and I thank you. If circumstances were different, well...
His words trailed off as I reviewed the requirement for capturing a foundation. Raid victory requirements. The following criteria must be met to overthrow a player's foundation. 1. All laborers must be killed or disabled. 2. All bound NPC companions must be KO'd. 3. The player must be KO'd. 4. Unbound NPCs must be killed or captured. 5. If the player has hired a foreman, it must be captured alive. NPCs and players who are KO'd will not spawn at the instance bind point for 2 minutes. In the event NPCs obtain victory over a player's foundation, the instance will be dissolved and the foundation stone will be returned to the player's inventory. Party chat. Destiny. I do not like sitting idle while you face these men alone. Gemini. It's better than giving up our new home. If you want this place for your people, you'll stay put until I've worked this out. Destiny. Priya's pregnancy sickness is bad, and I don't think she should be moved again. Gemini. Can Rashan help? Rashan. I will lend comforting words, but her health remains full. My magic is of no aid. I am praying to the goddess. Gemini. Roger that. Do the best you can. Rashan. Roger who? Destiny. He is using his strange expressions again. Gemini. Just hang tight. I need to figure a way out of this. So, tell me, Mulk continued. Did you float down from the sky? How did you come to be here? Do you remember? Were you a spirit before? I forced a smile. I sprouted from the ground like a tree. Mulk chuckled. I was just curious. I think when our mage gets here, I probably won't be seeing you again. Never hurts to have stories to tell, though. People love to be regaled with sightings of the light. And if you're a spawn of Solara, I could help you spread the word, even if I can't assist you here. A wave of nausea rushed over my gut. I doubled over and wrapped my arm around my waist. Hey! One of the knights ordered. Stop the jabbering and do what Paya told ya. Mulk sighed, then muttered. It'd be nice if he'd do his own dirty work. Powerful people rarely do, I replied. Mulk unsheathed one of my daggers. Again he whispered. Sorry about this. He cleared his throat and raised his voice. All right, Fowler. Give up. Let us open a portal for you to meet with the governor, and your foundation will be spared. The darkened blade of my dagger quivered in his grasp. I get it, I whispered. Put on a good show. Do what you have to do to get out of here alive and help your niece. Mulk's forehead wrinkled again. His spine straightened. I watched his gaze dart around the dark room. Then he huffed a quick exhale. I blinked my eyes in succession. Probert Mulk. Human. Level 18 fighter. Disposition. Friendly. And there it is, folks. I focused on my abilities to confirm none were on cooldown. Mythic Fowler. A voice echoed down the tunnel. The torch flames flickered. A stream of curse words flooded my mind. My hands quivered violently. I balled them into fists, opening and clenching them between my legs and the arms of the stone throne. Sounds like the mage is here, Mulk said. A waif of a man with dark skin and long white dreadlocks protruding from beneath the hood of a yellow robe appeared between the torches behind Mulk. Long-fingered hands reached up to pull the hood back, revealing thick ears that curved up into pointed tips. Quinn Lafral, Dark Elf, Level 54 Ice Magician. I jerked and stood. Mulk stepped to the side to give me a clear view. Ah, the mythic, at last. He gestured toward the chair. You appear ill, mythic. You are welcome to sit if you prefer. His attention dropped to my shaky hands. When I stood my ground, a shadow knight grabbed my leather vest and shoved me into the chair. The stone slammed into my back, pushing a shallow breath from my chest. Better. The magician circled the chair. I expected you'd glow. You don't seem like much to me, but there it is in my interface, plain to my eyes. Chenois. The words swept from his lips like the sound a breeze made through leaves. I am Quinn. It is my duty to provide you passage to the governor of Nall. You'll have to drag me, I said. Oh, I doubt it. Although I can't force you into a portal, I'm confident I can cause enough discomfort that you will beg me to let you pass through of your own will. He leaned in from one side and cupped the palm of his hand. Streaming white lines formed a hovering, jagged sphere of magic.
A hand of ice? A shard for a leg, perhaps?
I clutched the arms of the chair. Well, maybe you should get on with it. Otherwise we're going to be here all night. Lefral continued his slow pacing until he stood before me again.
Such bravado. Let me make another suggestion. Release your foreman to me, and I will spare your companions the torture promised by my deathlock friend outside.
I clenched my teeth against my shivers and growled through them. Pound sand, jerkwad.
Have it your way, Mythic.
He cocked his head toward Mulk.
Kill him.
When Mulk didn't move, the mage pivoted.
Is there a problem?
The second knight shoved Mulk forward.
Do what you're told, or you don't get paid.
Party chat. Destiny. I can wait no longer. Giles.
Agreed. There are low enough levels for you to be of use.
Gemini.
Dude, WTF? The mage will destroy her.
Destiny. We shall see. Giles.
I am close.
Gemini.
It's a bad freaking idea. They can do whatever they want to me, but they can't force me to step through the portal, so why risk yourselves? Gawk!
A sick, wet utterance echoed through the great room in answer. The magician spun and stepped to one side, revealing the tunnel leading out of the cave. The Shadow Knight who'd stood to my left buckled, then folded to the ground. Gank penalty. Your companion Giles has killed an opponent more than 10 levels beneath his own. Minus 25 light. Light disposition. Minus 225 of minus 250. Status. Low shadow. My elven companion grasped the torch from the wall and swung it at the other knight's face. Fah! The Shadow Knight screamed as his flesh burned. Giles burst into the shadows and appeared 10 feet away, behind the magician. Although poised to attack, he stepped backward, moving silently around my chair and toward the tunnel farthest from him. Mulk swung around, the dagger shaking furiously in his hand.
Enough of these games,
the dark elf barked.
Mulk, stab him. More sickness will bring him around.
Mulk stepped forward. I glared at the tip of my blade, wishing it was soulbound. Then, he wouldn't have been able to hold it, let alone stab me with it. But there were plenty of weapons around, and I suppose it didn't make any difference. I was going to have to go through with my plan, despite promises I'd made to my companions and myself since I'd met them. Mulk drew the dagger back. I winked my eyes in succession. A message flooded my interface, and I nodded. The dagger whipped toward my throat. It stopped inches away. He strained, trying to push it through the invisible force that prevented him from harming me. I eyed my interface. Probert Mulk is now your bound companion. Probert Mulk has 12 unspent attribute points. You may spend 12 attribute points on Probert Mulk.
What are you doing?
The mage growled.
Why are you glowing?
Mulk lowered the dagger, his eyes dancing as he read his own interface.
Bound companion? What's that mean?
Stab him,
Lefral ordered.
I can't.
Mulk wheeled on the mage.
Something is blocking me.
Hello, brother, Giles whispered from the shadows. The low sound had the effect of masking his location. Giles was badass. The living Shadow Knight stood on one knee, patting embers from his face and neck while cursing up a storm. Blisters swelled on his cheeks. Probert Mulk backed out of view to my right, toward the mine tunnel. The mage faced me but took 3 confident steps backward. His body glowed yellow as he withdrew, both hands behind his back.
I'm no brother to high elf scum,
the dark elf replied.
Show yourself, or I'll kill the mythic.
Giles circled, and I spied his ghostly apparition on my opposite side. But you cannot kill this one, for he is bathed in the light of the goddess. He will only reappear and cause you frustration. As you said, all you can do is make him sick, but he will survive. The mage's head turned toward the direction from which Giles' voice had come. He raised his hands and 2 slivers of ice zipped across the distance. Giles dropped to push-up position, and they crashed into the stony wall. Gwyn the Frog casts Frozen Shard. Giles dodges. My friend and mentor pushed himself up, then took 2 nimble steps away from me to my right, near Mulk. Apparently he'd gotten the message we had a new companion, albeit involuntarily. The Thrall raised his hands again, and a casting bar appeared over his head.
Do you see how he trembles, elf? Do you desire to see your master suffer?
Giles zipped through the shadows and reappeared on the other side of the mage. Tearing the other torch from the wall, he shoved it into the back of the remaining Shadow Knight's neck. A new onslaught of curses emitted from the Shadow Knight as he burst forward and toppled to the floor. He rolled over in the dirt, patting the burned spots of flesh on the back of his neck.
Looks to me like you're in deep, Lefral,
Mulk said.
Silence, you idiot,
the magician replied. He turned and pointed 2 index fingers at the top of the tunnel leading out of the cave. When he pulled the fingers apart, a casting bar appeared. He traced white lines in the oval shape of the rocky surface in both directions until they joined at the bottom. The area inside the oval shimmered and burst with color as the scene washed into view beyond. I spied buildings of gray bricks trimmed in vines with yellow blossoms rustling in a night breeze beneath torchlight. Not only had the magician cast a portal, but he'd shaped it so it blocked the only exit from the cave.
Step into the portal, Mulk,
the Thrall muttered.
It will take you to the governor, and you can claim your reward.
Mulk played it perfectly.
I'm not stepping away from this wall as long as that rogue is lurking.
I will provide cover, idiot.
A rattling sound drew my focus over my shoulder, and a shower of ice pellets fell near Mulk. My elf companion had circled the caster again after burning the night. He stood in the area of effect halo, his back pressed into the wall. The lit circle illustrating the area affected by the spell was just inches from the tips of his boots. He hugged the tunnel wall as he crept away in slow motion.
Lefral casts Ice Storm 3. Giles is slowed.
Mulk stepped toward the portal as a familiar voice rang out from that direction.
Lefral, is he gone yet? What is taking so long?
Pyre, there is a rogue here. He's too close to my level and I cannot see him.
He continued to cast the Ice Storm spell, hoping to hold Giles at bay. The knight peeled himself off the ground, ripped a one-handed scythe from his belt, then sprinted toward Mulk.
Traitor!
Mulk raised the dagger and stepped back. I stood and pivoted. A blur of motion appeared in the tunnel on the opposite side, then zipped into the glow cast by the portal.
Ah!
The knight slammed hard to the ground. Destiny slammed her shield into his back.
Destiny performs charge. Hassin Dorn is stunned. Dorn, minus 42 HP.
My cat-like friend pounded her mace into Dorn's back, striking again and again as she grunted with fury. The mage circled away from her.
Destiny is enraged. Attack up. Destiny attacks Hassin Dorn. Hassin Dorn, minus 47 HP. Minus 11 HP. Rage. Minus 32 HP. Minus 10 HP. Rage. Minus 45 HP. Hassin Dorn is no longer stunned.
The Michonne jumped to her feet, bent her knees, then leaped high in the air, coming down with a crash that cracked the ground beneath her weapon.
Destiny performs Thunderous Smash. Hassin Dorn is stunned. AoE. Quinn Lefral resists.
I expected my poorly trained wolf to appear at any moment, since he'd probably seen Destiny vacate their hiding place moments earlier. But for once, the animal had obeyed. There was hope for it yet. The mage's spell cast ended. Giles moved toward the magician in slow motion. Through the translucent portal, I spied the shadowy form of the Deathlock rounding the curve in the tunnel, moving toward us. No sooner had I noticed him than a green glow burst from the gold mine tunnel and zipped to the center of the room.
Destiny! Watch out! Demon!
I'd forgotten the Deathlock had sent the demon in search of our laborers. A quick check of my Foundation party revealed they still lived, so he hadn't searched the mine yet. My tank jumped off of Mulk and backed away, raising her beetle shield to block its advance.
It's level 73. Don't engage. Run!
The Deathlock stepped through the portal and into the great room. He raised his hands. Fireballs erupted to life over each palm. Destiny dove away and rolled behind the stone chair. The Deathlock's gaze met mine as I stood dormant, like an idiot, and stopped his cast.
Kill her,
he said to his demon. The fireballs flared to life again as his focus changed. I looked where he was looking, at Giles, who lurked in the back left corner of the room near the mine. The fireballs tore through space toward my rogue companion, but he vanished in a purple cloud of smoke, and they passed through the space where Giles had been, then slammed into the back wall. Shah! The mage shuddered on my right as his back bent and he faced the stony ceiling. Giles performs spine snap on Quinn Lafral. Lafral, minus 287 HP. The elf ripped his dagger from the mage's back, then slammed his hilt into the base of his skull. Giles performs nape job. Lafral is stunned. Lafral teetered on his feet. Green Z's floated above his head. Giles vanished again. The demon lunged past me. A moment later, Destiny was thrown into the center of the room. Kermeshian Pyre moved away from the portal, hand raised. Green spirals of light surrounded it as his casting bar filled, and he set his gaze on Giles's ghostly outline. Time slowed. I looked right and spied Giles. I glanced toward the left center of the floor where the demon closed on Destiny. I eyed the deathlock as he ready to spell that might one-shot my elven companion. Then I turned my attention on the portal. Taking a deep breath to quell my nausea, I sprang from the chair, snatched my bag, then charged toward the magical gateway. 29. A vision of purple smoke filled my mind as I lunged toward the oval leading to the governor's seat of power. I vanished from the physical realm and into the ether, then reappeared on the other side. A glance over my shoulder revealed that Pyre had stopped his cast when he saw me leap.
I see you, Fowler,
he bellowed.
I'm not fooled by your tricks. Demon, give chase.
I rushed down the tunnel without looking back. When I burst into the open air beneath double full moons, the reflections of flames painted the grassy plateau as my storehouse and architect's cabin burned in the night. A quick glance to the left revealed the cover hole in which we'd stashed my foreman. It had gone unnoticed by our enemies. Sickness dragged me down, slowing my pace as I ran for everything I was worth. I bolted down the steps, despite a stamina penalty, and fought to draw breath into my lungs. Someone had dropped planks across the spike pit, but as I rushed heel to toe across one, I eyed two bloody corpses with pointed stakes jutting through their bodies. Seconds later, I was moving through the pass, gasping for air with sweat rolling into my eyes in rivers. A greenish glow reflected off the grass in front of me, telling me the demon was closing, but I didn't look back. I focused on the swirling motes representing the exit from the instance and pumped my rubbery legs for all they were worth. A sickening heat washed over my neck as the demon's glow grew closer. As long as he didn't touch me, I'd remain in stealth when I hit that door, but if he broke it, everything was screwed. I lowered my head, dove for the motes at the last moment, and burst into the night outside. After a hard cut to the right, I brought my back to the stony wall. I stared at the instant's doorway, but the demon didn't appear. The campers had packed up their gear and loaded up horse-drawn carts. Their caravan was a shadow on the southern horizon. On my side of them sat men on horseback in a long row. A quick check of my interface revealed they were in their 20s and 30s, lower level than Pyre and Lafral, but still too numerous for us to mess with. I leaned there, panting, thankful I'd gone unnoticed, but wondering what had become of Destiny and Giles. Party chat. Gemini. Giles? Where are you? Status? Destiny. We are captured, Gemini. Roshan. Captured? Priya. Oh no. Giles. Stay in the shadows, Shenhua. The worst they can do is sicken us if they try to kill us, thanks to your gift. Wait and see what opportunities the goddess makes available. Roshan. The goddess helps those who help themselves. I will not stand for this. Priya. Roger that. Gemini. Priya, you're sick. Priya. Then I will crawl to your aid, my love. Gemini. Don't do anything stupid. Stay where you are, both of you. Silence on the channel. Gemini. Roshan? Priya? I cursed only in my thoughts. We'd just gone through this whole ordeal where they hadn't listened to me, and I'd been crushed by a rock. Now, they were trying to take matters in their own hands again. A feeling of helplessness washed over me to add to my sickness, and I lowered myself to the ground. The men on horseback continued facing the instant's portal. It seemed like hours passed when Pyre finally appeared at the entrance. I shuffled behind a rock outcropping to aid my stealth, then watched as 4 soldiers in plate walked Dicini and Giles out. Raid will end in 30 seconds. The last enemies have left your instance before it was captured. If no enemies enter your instance within 28 seconds, it will be reset to the state prior to the raid. Giles' health bar was mostly empty, and a green light with swirling black serpents wrapped around his neck like a collar. One of the soldiers shoved Dicini in the back. She landed on her chest and spat dirt. "Scum!" she bellowed.
"Search for Fowler. He's out here."
The men climbed off their horses and fanned out, moving toward the high cliffs on either side of the instance, a few moving in my direction. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to conjure a plan. I needed a distraction to turn their attention away, or else I'd be captured, and this whole game would be up. There was no way out if that happened. I could resist. I could run. But I held no doubt they'd torture my companions, kill my laborers, and eventually find Pulo. Just the prospect of extended periods of res sickness weighing my people down tore at my chest. Your instance will reset in 13 seconds. If no enemies enter your foundation within 13 seconds, it will be reset.
"You!"
Pyre bellowed.
"Get back inside and hold position. Run!"
Apparently he'd gotten the message too, and wanted to ensure my instance burned to the ground for his trouble. 2 soldiers closed on me. They were just 10 yards away. One was level 25. I had little doubt he'd see me when he passed the outcropping. 5 yards. The soldier stepped up, peering behind the outcropping, then looked right at me. "Look out!" I cringed and raised my arms, then realized they were still transparent. The voice had come from further away. The soldier turned. "Ah!" An ear-shattering scream echoed in the night. Then the soldiers turned to hustle toward the entrance. The level 25 sped off. I climbed onto the rock to peer over. The twin full moons outlined a chaotic scene. A beast had burst from the instance and was halfway into a leap of incredible height as it jumped onto the chest of a soldier headed for the ethereal doorway. "Stop it! Get it off me!" The 7-foot-tall monster's muscles ripped as it gouged a hole through the plate armor and decimated the guard. Then it turned its attention and leapt to another, tearing his head clear of his torso before moving to the next. 4 guards were dead in seconds. Pyre swung around and raised his hands as the beast landed and faced him. A low growl emitted from its protruding jaws. A white halo bloomed around Giles. I shifted my attention to a figure in a shimmering robe standing just beyond the entrance to my foundation. "Roshan!" A guard charged the beast. The monster threw a haymaker through the center of his chest, and its fist blew a blood explosion out his back. It raised the man like a rag doll, then threw him over its shoulder. The beast glowed. The number 19 appeared above its head, then shot toward the sky. My jaw dropped as I focused on the beast. Priya Sky, werewolf, level 19, elite, strength 24, dexterity 14, intelligence 1, wisdom 1, constitution 19, charisma 1. Priya has 5 attribute points available. Since your disposition with Priya is beloved, you may spend 5 attribute points. My gaze trailed up to the 2 full moons casting their glows across the rolling hills. That's why she was sick. Why didn't my interface give me any indication? Those were thoughts for later. Guards circled the beast. The green glow surrounding Giles vanished. Then he did the same. The werewolf paced back and forth inside the circle of soldiers, sizing up the deathlock that would undoubtedly finish her off in one shot. As if he read my mind, the deathlock raised both hands and threw 2 fireballs at Priya, slamming her backward and onto the ground. Priya Sky has died. Giles moved along the side of the cliff opposite me, then slid behind another outcropping. From here I could see him assessing the crowd of level 20s and 30s. I considered all the low levels and recalled his negative light disposition. If he started roundhousing them, dropping them, he could succumb to the will of Hokram. Or whatever. Dicini remained planted on the ground with a soldier's foot on her back. Two others dragged Rashan toward the deathlock.
Ah, a light priestess. You must be the prize stolen from the governor. Your return will gain me a nice bonus, I'm sure.
He turned on Destiny.
But someone must pay for the death of the mage.
He cocked his chin up.
Do you hear that, rogue? Your murder will not go without punishment. If you will not reveal yourself, then this one shall suffer in your stead.
Pyre turned to one of the guards.
Put the priestess on the back of your horse and ride. I tire of these games.
The guard nodded and grabbed Rashan's wrist.
No, not again. Think.
Your foundation instance has been reset.
At least Pulo and the laborers were safe.
Pulo.
A memory came on the breeze, and Pulo's words echoed in my head.
The mere mention of it dims the light in my soul.
Then a shiver that had nothing to do with resurrection sickness crept up my spine as I brought up my inventory. A new memory of words spoken by a shopkeeper named Lyra echoed in my mind.
The details are of little importance, but as it is not a thing we can allow to fall into bandit or mercenary hands, I don't want to risk having my contact in Warrington send it back, especially considering the bandits on the roads. It is safe for the time being, but if someone of influence were to buy it off the black market or intercept it, let's say whole towns could crumble in the chaos.
I reached into my bag and retrieved the item. Creeping around the outcropping, I patted the stony surface until I knocked something loose. A stone rolled down, rattling on the rocky floor of the cliff. My head jerked in the direction of my party and our enemies.
What was that?
One of the guards asked.
Why don't you go and see?
Pyre growled. The guard set off in my direction.
There!
He pointed toward me. My stealth broke.
Damn.
I stood tall, holding up the object in my left hand and the stone in my right. The left glowed black and purple, as if the thing would engulf it in darkness.
No, Gemini!
Rashan bellowed. She struggled to free herself of the guard's grasp.
You can't!
I must. If I want to save my people and my foundation, I have to do this.
Pyre raised his hand and a casting bar appeared. Dropping the object on the ground, I gripped the stone with both hands and raised them high overhead. When I swung them downward, the world froze and a message appeared in my interface.
If you choose to destroy Entropy Crystal, you will lose 150 light points. Are you sure you want to crush the Entropy Crystal? Not recommended. Yes or no?
My chest tightened. I held my breath and selected yes.
Are you absolutely certain you want to crush the Entropy Crystal? Seriously, this action is not recommended. Yes or no?
I focused on yes. A shockwave of purple and black light blasted across the land, blowing grass and weeds as far as the eye could see. The green surrounding me dried, crumbled, then wafted away as black sand in a breeze. I climbed onto the outcropping as the guard closed on my position. Two black hands burst from the earth, showering him with soil and stone shards. They grabbed his ankles, then yanked him down into the ground. Guards fled. Pyre stepped clumsily backward as demons began to rise from the ground.
Party chat. Gemini.
Giles, stun the one who has Rashan, then run. Destiny, move fast while the guy behind you is distracted. Go! The guard holding Rashan jerked as his head slammed forward, his chin hitting his chest, as Giles burst from the ether and punched with his hilt. Destiny leapt to her feet, then swung her mace into the back of a guard's knees. He tumbled as she rocketed past him toward the instance. A black creature with sinewy muscles and glowing yellow eyes leapt from the earth and grabbed the guard. Giles dragged Rashan behind him, keeping their path wide of the conflict. Jumping back into stealth, I crept along the wall, then stepped over Priya's werewolf corpse. Pyre sped toward the magic doorway, but two demons erupted from the soil, then lunged toward him. I focused on one.
Blight Demon. Demon. Level 90. Elite. These servants of Hokram suck the souls out of sentient beings and turn them into demons destined to patrol Blight until killed.
Beneath their legless, hovering forms, the ground darkened and black shards bulged from beneath. Pyre turned and blanked out of existence, reappearing near one of the horses. He pulled off the guard who'd mounted it, leapt onto its back, then raced toward the grassy hills. One of the huge demons charged the rider who'd been thrown off his mount. His scream filled the air as the guard clawed the blighting soul. A glowing green stem like a handless arm erupted from the demon's chest. The scream became a shriek as the guard's body rose into the air. He flailed wildly as the sound of his desperation echoed off the rocks behind me. His skin dried and fissures reminding me of when I dropped the foundation stone formed in his flesh. A green glow emanated from the cracks that shot light in all directions. Flame of the same hue burned his clothes away in just seconds as he thumped to the ground. Then rose a glowing minion of hell. Lesser Blight Demon, level 17. What if they come for one of us? As if they'd heard my thought, the demons who threatened Pyre gave up their chase and turned. Black tendrils of smoke surrounded their eyes as they raised their shoulders and charged in my direction. Shit! I ran like hell. When I reached the instance, I focused on the fleeing deathlock a final time. Private chat. Gemini. Give my regards to the governor, you dick. Pyre. You will all pay for the rest of your days. Gemini. And will still outlive you. You have closed the private chat. You have blocked Kermashian Pyre. Kermashian Pyre may no longer chat with you. My heart was still pounding as I stepped backward into the instance. The foot-worn path leading to the valley was unchanged. The grass appeared as green as ever in the view of my night vision spell. I took a few steps away from the door, then watched to see if a demon would enter and drag blight across my place. But the demons never appeared. We were safe. And trapped. 30. I focused on a red flashing icon as I stood facing the instance portal. Your decision to destroy the entropy crystal and release Hokram's minions into Enora's physical realm has displeased Solara. You have been stripped of 150 points of light. Light, 0 of 25. Alignment, neutral. Next threshold, light, plus or minus 25. Next rank, good or waning. Yeah, well, what the hell was I supposed to do? I asked, glaring into the starry sky. The full moons had continued down on their axes, so the closer white moon had taken the lead in the nightly race. My mind went to Priya. The whole lycanthropy thing had me irked. Had I not inspected her a single time since we left the first instance? I brought up her character sheet and checked. Priya Sky, half-elf shifter, level 19 shadow mage, attributes, strength, 8, dexterity, 3, intelligence, 23, wisdom, 13, constitution, 22, charisma, 8. Shifter. The game had turned the mother of my unborn child into a freaking werewolf. That explained why she no longer showed the lycanthropy disease. It wasn't a disease anymore. She'd shifted, for lack of a better word. So what? Am I going to have to hide her from full moons from now on? How is it fair that we run an instance to unlock a mine and she suffers permanently for it? Solara, your light disposition with me has just taken a massive dump, so we'll call it even. I realized I was talking to the goddess instead of the AI. I'm losing my mind. I stomped up the stairs beneath the crackling glows of the storehouses and architect's cabin as they burned. Doesn't look like a reset to me. But I shouldn't have been surprised. Nothing in Enora was what it seemed. My expectations held less value than a copper coin to the AI. But I held one leg up on Enora, in the form of a book she wanted destroyed in the hinterlands of Saran. So it can't do what you just did. You're a genius. I barked a very nasty word. If Priya could walk into the moonlight, I might have enjoyed testing her ice storm spell on the fires, but that wasn't the hand I was dealt. We'd have to rebuild. Speaking of which, I walked past the cabin they'd left in place for whatever reason and around the side of the cave. When I raised the trap door, Pulo peered up at me. The dwarf slapped his chest. Oh, thank the goddess! I see the laborers have survived. What of your party? Priya fell in battle. I assume she'll resurrect in the cave in a minute or two. We'll have to keep her inside now that she's a shifter. A shifter, you say? The lycanthropy held on, then? Does it not always? Pulo shrugged. Some resist it, others don't. I can't say I have any experience with it, but that's what I know. As I've said before, I don't always ken where my knowledge comes from. I offered a hand and lugged the heavy dwarf out of the hole. You don't look well, Master Gemini.
Yeah, I have res sickness, too.
What of the raid?
We stopped them in their tracks. I'll give you the details later, but for now, suffice it to say that you should be glad you can't go outside. The dwarf threw me a confused look, which I ignored as I turned toward the cave. We'll have to rebuild, but don't you worry about that. I can spend some BPs to raise the storehouse again, first thing. The architect's cabin isn't an immediate concern, since it simply provides a buff to blueprint discovery speed. Right. I didn't care. I opened party chat and informed everyone we were in the clear for the time being. We all gathered in the great room, where I was happy to find Moggy, Validas, Jonta, Brayden, and Chim in good shape, if not a little shaken. Moggy's axe rested on one shoulder. I noted what appeared to be blood on its blade. How did you get blood on your blade?
Guard come to pool,
he said.
Moggy fight.
No kidding. Did you kill him?
Moggy shook his head and cocked it to the side. I peered into the corner of the great room to spy a man with a tourniquet around his leg and a rag stuffed into his mouth.
We took a prisoner? The orc nodded with great enthusiasm.
Moggy fight.
Well, I'll be a son of a... I glared at Pulo suspiciously.
I thought you said laborers couldn't fight.
Oh, Master Gemini, I never said that. I said they shouldn't fight. They're valuable resources. But Mogu is a level 20 forester now, and that means he can swing his axe at an enemy as readily and accurately as he can a tree.
Sometimes I just want to find a hole and... A bright flash of white light filled the room. We all turned as Priya materialized back into existence. I gazed into her crystal blue eyes and smiled. She returned it, then vomited on my boots. I sighed at the expelled stomach contents, then ran my fingers through her golden curls. Do me a solid and stay inside, hey? She nodded. I guided her to the chair and, for the first time, she didn't resist sitting in it. My sickness was fading, and since I'd only experienced it once, I'd forgotten the way it trailed off. The timer claimed 7 minutes remained. I squeezed in next to her as Dicini and Giles exited the right-hand cave. They circled around the chair. The Michonne wore a mask of tight muscles, and her eyes were dull with concern as she appraised Priya.
I'm fine,
the half-elf said next to me. She threw both arms around me and leaned in. I was fine with that. A figure stepped out of the shadows near the mine. I squinted into the darkness.
Mulk.
The former mercenary raised his hands in surrender.
Could someone explain to me what is meant by bound companion?
Wide-eyed gazes surrounded me.
But you said you'd never bind someone without their leave,
Priya said. Dicini squeezed Priya's shoulder. Our master adapts to given situations. Mulk sat on the packed earthen floor with his hand stretched across his forehead, rubbing his temples with his middle finger and thumb.
What you're telling me is I'm bound to you in this way forever?
Yes. I checked your disposition. It seemed you were conflicted about stabbing me. I saved you the torment.
I killed demons and beasts, not people. Am I stuck here?
No,
Priya answered in my stead. I flashed her a look and received a confused expression in return.
You have the free roam option, right?
Yes, and I would happily check it so he can go where he pleases and live his life separate from us if he desired.
Hey, freedom sounds like a good thing, Mulk interjected. Assuming none of you wants to kill me.
Heads shook in unison, except for Priya's. A wave of contempt washed over me, though I held none. I threw her a curious look.
Moggy will kill if master says.
The orc raised his axe. I threw up a hand and shook my head. The laborer frowned and lowered the weapon. Pula smiled. I can always use an extra pair of hands, especially from a strong fellow like yourself.
Do I get a vote?
Mulk asked. I shook my head. That's what I was going to explain before I was interrupted. If we let you go, you're going to die the second you step outside the Foundation. When the raid ended, I had to invite you to my party to keep you from being tossed out there to fend for yourself.
Oh, that's why you did that, huh?
He lowered to a mutter.
Glad I accepted.
Yep. I'm afraid I've unleashed a demon regiment, and a bunch of monsters are roaming around out there, blighting the land outside both entrances. So, your options are limited.
I see. And what might those limited options be, sire?
Well, what's non-optional is you stop calling me sire. The last thing I need around here is another title.
What should I call you?
Gemini is fine.
Call him Master,
Priya said. Screw you, elf. I shot eye lasers. Gemini is fine.
Okay, Gemini. So what are my other options?
Well, there's only one, really. That you serve until we can clear out that mess outside, which we might never do. That or I can have Prince Renard deliver a painless death. I threw Giles a suspicious glower to round out my snark, but always true to form, he one-upped me. I can't kill your companions, the elf rogue reminded. I was throwing in your face the fact you hadn't shared your title or how you'd come to own it. My title is hundreds of years older than you, and it hasn't been used in the last 50. Poor excuse. Later, then. Fine. I focused on Molk. Step outside and you're dead. Trust me.
What about my niece?
Let me think on it. I don't want her to suffer either. If you weren't a man of conscience, I'd be looking at a longer stint of resurrection sickness and my foundation might be in ruins. We'll figure something out. Molk's lips parted to speak, but Giles held up a hand. Gemini persistently makes every effort to keep his assurances. Patience, young man. Molk nodded. The first hint of a smile creased his lips.
Tell me about this service option.
Priya pulled me into the library, then set her hands on her hips.
Are you sure about this?
Sure. He actually seems like a nice enough guy.
He raided us.
Yeah, but he was a gun for hire. His folks were just here to camp and act as placeholders until the governor's real men showed. He'd only come inside because they were angry he didn't get me to surrender, and he had to prove himself. What would you have done?
What if he's a spy?
What's he going to do, kill me? He couldn't stab me. I don't think that's a problem. So, what else might he do? Oh, I know. Give away our top-secret location that got raided half an hour ago and appears as a point of interest for anyone in range with an interface map. No, that doesn't pan out either.
Cast off your snark, you unruly child.
She shoved me, then glanced at her hands as if surprised she could.
Fine, but if he screws the pooch, I'll electrocute him and give him res sickness.
You won't be able to do that if he's in our party. Priya snapped her fingers.
Damn it.
She nodded and turned toward the door. Then she stopped.
Will it burden you to sleep next to a shifter tonight? I've missed you.
I think that'll be fine since your alter ego can't hurt me. Unless the werewolf requests a duel. She frowned. I wrapped my arms around her. Werewolf or not, you're still Priya. If there's a cure, we'll find it. If there isn't, then we'll adapt. After all, that's what we do. Adapt. Epilogue. 2 weeks later. As our first order of business following the raid, Pulo and I had paced off the distance from the quarry to the grove of trees, then to the last point in the triangle, where we set the new storehouse. I'd only been off by a few feet the first time when I'd eyeballed it on the map. I considered putting in a support ticket requesting measurement tools be inserted into the map, but then I wouldn't enjoy the camaraderie we gained by performing tasks together, so I didn't. Enora rewarded players and NPCs with skills when they made an effort anyway. We might automate some functions, like skinning animals over and over, but where we could gain more skill points by doing the manual labor, we would. On the northwestern side of the plateau atop the stairs sat an anvil with a rain shelter, as Pulo had promised. In the short term, he'd be banging out tools for the advancing laborers to make the most of their skills. When time permitted, he'd start working on metal weapons and armor. The foundation was up to 10 laborers. I decided to spend the gold and max them out until it was time to upgrade our instance to the next level, when it would become a hamlet. Unfortunately, that would happen while I was gone. Since players could only self-learn stealth and no one else had a stealth class, only Giles and I were exiting the instance. I would depart with 18 gold, 87 silver, and 77 copper. Giles and I had packed plenty of food for our journeys, though his would require less since he was headed for a city and I wasn't. Priya and Destiny had given me some cooking lessons, raising my skill into the 20s, and making it so I could hunt with my bow, roast what I killed, and only access my reserves when I had to. A lot had changed in the 2 weeks since the raid. The Foundation had a tannery, a fishery, which was really just a bunch of netting along the river with a dock, and an alchemist's lab. The sawmill would be finished soon. For the last 2 weeks, I'd started each day with a morning run next to Destiny. My stamina had gained 19 points. I almost never ran out of breath or pushed the meter to its limits. After the run, the Foundation personnel converged around Priya's cooking pot and had whatever flavor stew she'd conjured for us. Pulo would discuss assignments for the day and ensure his laborers were well fed before he set them to work. After breakfast, Destiny and I went to the pool in the back of the mine to bathe together. Although my usual biological reactions accompanied my first look at her athletic body in the nude, I took her willingness to unsheath it for me without reservation each time we slid into the warm water as the ultimate form of trust. After that first trip, I stopped watching as she disrobed and slid in because the way I loved her was perfect. I didn't need her body to express it. After baths, my usual party would join Mulk in the clearing that would become our proving grounds for combat training. When Pulo started summoning defenders, this was when they'd level their combat skills. While Giles and I were gone, Destiny would be charged with leading production. Roshan helped Charney to increase his healing skills through meditation to channel the light. Since her heals were capped, the goblin joined our team duels and performed all healing functions. Soon his skills would be capped for his level. If we couldn't go outside and level up, the least we could do was cap the skills we had, especially since I'd taken on a new class. While Bard might be a cool class in a dungeon, my situation was going to change in a hurry. I needed to be able to survive on my own again, and do so in higher level areas. So, I'd elected Samurai and worked with Giles and Destiny to build up my skills. The sword strokes' names were Japanese, and for some reason didn't translate via my interface. While Giles called out actions, I often activated the wrong ones. Melee was a different experience than enjoying combat at a distance, and Destiny beat me down with regularity. So focusing on the names without relying on the activation schemes in my interface proved challenging. But Giles did things a certain way, and Destiny wasn't about to take it easy on me when I was going to be out in the world on my own for the first time since I'd entered it. I thanked Solara every day I had healers to erase my bruises after combat training. Before long, I held my own. After a while, I gained the upper hand as much as I lost it. Then, after Destiny and I had battled for half an hour without rest, we grasped our knees and panted while sweat dripped from our foreheads. Giles had nodded his approval. It was time to move out. The remainders of our days varied according to need, but we all chipped in with the laborers, and I had Pulo ensure that each party member worked with a different one each day. Morale was high. Although she understood I'd cracked the entropy crystal to protect our new home and stop the governor's men from taking her from me again, Roshan had withdrawn since the day of the conflict. I tried to talk to her a few times when I caught her alone, but she'd always had somewhere else she needed to be. I'd disappointed her, but I'd seen no other way out. I'd give her space. Soon, I'd be giving her a lot of space. Priya's belly was pooching. She glowed even more than usual. There had been no reoccurrence of her shape-shifting, but my interface told me we still weren't out of the woods. One of Giles's tasks would be to procure a remedy on that front. He'd also seek out a solution for our little problem outside while I journeyed north. I spotted Giles when I gazed past the anvil as he paced across the valley with Mogu in tow. The orc's hands were behind his back as he ascended the steps toward my party, and I wondered what he might be hiding. The elf wore an unusual half-smile. It confirmed Moggy concealed something, but I didn't try to peek and ruin the surprise. Although Giles hadn't said as much, I got the impression he enjoyed the orc's company. They were a strange pair, but Giles had been his teacher from the moment he spawned 2 weeks earlier, and they rarely separated. I'd even convinced Pulo to let Moggy join combat training, even if he couldn't level fighting skills. His stats benefited, and he still proved able to drop trees on the high cliffs then lower them to the valley with Pulo's counterweighted pulleys after everyone else was exhausted. When they arrived, Giles stepped to one side. "Mogu has a gift for our mythic to aid us in our travels." Mogu grunted, took 2 steps forward, then shoved a scabbard into my hands. I grasped the pommel of the sword and pulled. It clicked, then whooshed out. "So, this is what the 2 of you have been losing sleep over?" My fingers traced the lines neatly carved into the scabbard. "What are these?" "Elven runes of protection. I'm afraid they don't actually do anything and are the product of ancient times my race has left behind, but we value our heritage. Since I'm bound to you, it is only right you should carry it with you."
"Magi, help Shenhua!"
A lump swelled in my throat, not just because of the gift, but because I was encircled by friends I was leaving behind, and didn't know how long we'd be apart. "Thank you, guys. I'm touched." "It's not the finest quality I've made, but it should suffice." Moggy lowered his head and nodded.
"Master Gemini and Giles come home safe."
"We'll make every effort, Moggy." I bowed deeply.
"You'd better."
Priya stepped close to interlock her fingers with mine. Rashan stepped up on the other side and pulled the scabbard from my hand. Pulling my belt around to secure it to my back, she yanked the strap tight. Then she adjusted my bow, circled me to check my belt and daggers, then smiled. "This good?" I released Priya's fingers, reached back, grasped the sword's handle, then whipped it free. "It's perfect," I said. "Much better than the wooden katana we practiced with. It feels balanced." Rashan kissed my cheek. "I will pray for you. Come back to us soon." She hurried off toward the cave, hands swiping her face. "Rashan?" She didn't stop.
"She's not good about showing her emotions,"
Priya said.
"Send her a private chat before you get out of range."
For about 10 days, the Light Priestess had tried to guide me through meditation to discover my spirit ability. But when we'd finally made progress, a system message informed me I required a minimum score of plus or minus 25, depending on disposition to the light or darkness to discover it. Since destroying the entropy crystal had wiped my light points, I was flat at 0. That had pissed me off. Priya gazed at me expectantly, and I retraced the conversation. "I'll send her a chat, and I'll send you all party messages until I'm out of range." She pulled my hand so I'd twist to face her, then she peered up with those crystal blue elven eyes.
"Promise me you'll be back before the baby comes."
"I can only promise I'll try. It might take a while to find Destini's mother and sister." Pulo had explained to me that, while it was possible for enemies to portal out of my instance, they could not portal into it. But if I invited someone to my party and they opened a portal, it could open in my foundation, as long as I didn't change my bind point. The mechanics lined up with other games I played, where I couldn't port into a dungeon, but I could port out. "First, we have to make it across the Blight," I said. "To that end," Pulo stepped forward and slipped a vial in my hand. This was the reason I'd changed the foreman's plans to put emphasis on herb gathering and building the alchemist's shop. The spy Pyre had sent into the instance 2 weeks before had given me the idea. "Invisibility enhancement potion. Type, potion. Plus 35 to stealth ability for 15 minutes. Remember to hustle your bum when you get out there, Master Gemini. The sword enchantment and the potion will give you the equivalent of 40 additional levels of stealth, but Prince Renard tells me the demons out there are even higher, or ye might be popping back up in the cave with sickness on ye." While anyone could drink the potion, its enhancement of stealth abilities presumed the presence of the actual skill. Leave it to Enora to have an enhancement potion lower in the tech tree than an actual invisibility potion. Hopefully we'd have better alchemy ranks by the time Giles and I returned, and the problem would be solved. Until then, everyone else was stuck. "Thanks, Pulo." Destiny reached out and unfolded her hand. "A note for my mother and sister. You have received a quest. Deliver the sealed letter to Destini's family. Rewards, plus 100 reputation with the Michonne Pride, 7,000 XP. "Machini and Cassini," I said. "Right?" Destiny gave a single nod. "Your memory honors me, but their names are also written on the note. Ensure the seal is not broken, and they will hear your invitation. I slipped the note into my bag where it couldn't be altered. It dropped into the slot where the entropy crystal had been. Will do. And you have the map with my markings of their camps. I set my hand on her shoulder. I've got it, hon. We've been over this 20 times. It's right in my interface. I'll find them. Cindy nodded and took a hesitant step forward. She cupped my cheeks and gave me a long, soft kiss on the forehead.
You're going to have to kiss me better than that,
Priya said as Destiny stepped away. I hoisted Priya up. She threw her legs around me.
I love you, Gemini Fowler.
And I you, Priya Sky. It was a grand kiss. I set her on her feet, then stared at her for another long moment, committing her face to memory, as if I couldn't just look at her character sheet in my interface anytime I wanted. Giles and I set off, down the steps, with everyone except Rashawn in tow. Lucius paced next to me, and Priya grasped my hand on the other side. We stopped to untether one of the stallions we'd liberated from a soldier we'd killed south of the Plague Barrens. Then Giles clicked his tongue. The horse's hooves clopped along beside him as we headed for the narrower northern pass. Do you think it's wise to take one of the governor's horses instead of Pickney? I'm sure Destiny would let you borrow him. Giles shook his head. I stabled a mount in the small outpost south of the Plague Barrens. I don't plan to ride this horse into Trowsby. What mount? The one you followed us on from Brumhill? Giles shook his head. I traded up for stealth purposes when I guessed you might end up in the Plague Barrens. I'm sure you'll decide it's unlike me, but I'd as soon surprise you. It's a lovely animal. I procured it in Warrington from a vendor of exotic creatures who procured it from a Northman tribe. Northmen? Much to learn, Gemini. Treading through the pass took an eternity because of how I dragged my feet, but we finally arrived. Mulk reached for my elven mentor's hand.
And you'll seek help for my niece.
As promised, Probert. Giles bowed slightly. After I've visited Pronto in Warrington and obtained the information we need, I'll see to it. If things went according to plan, Giles would visit the elderly caster who'd saved Priya and me on the streets of Warrington when Priya disabled a murderer on the street. I hoped he'd join us, but he also had information I thought we'd need if we were to stand against the governor when the time came.
Will you stop here on your way back to the north?
Priya asked him. Giles shook his head. I will try to find someone who can open a portal. If not, I will likely continue on. A stop will just slow our timeline. Priya nodded, but I read disappointment in sudden creases surrounding her eyes. Giles was her lone attachment to her elven heritage, and they'd spent many late evenings talking under the canopy of stars. Lucia stepped forward and threw her arms out. I knelt and hugged her.
Come back safe, boss.
Then she whispered just loud enough for Priya to hear.
And don't forget, I'm always up for a roll around the firs if it motivates you to come back. Is that supposed to bother me?
Priya asked. Lucius grabbed Priya's hand, kissed it, then held it to her abdomen. I gave a 2-finger salute. Hopefully this won't be too short of a trip.
Not too long.
Priya returned the salute. The others followed her lead. The moat swirling before me conjured a foreboding memory. A week earlier, the prisoner who'd refused to serve the Foundation had decided he didn't want to stick around. Before we realized what was happening, he'd taken off down the northern pass and jumped through the Instance Gateway. Giles had given chase and tried to bring him back, but he'd been too late. When I asked what he'd seen, he said the atrocity was a burden he'd rather not share. I sighed, then turned to Giles. You ready for this? He nodded, slipped his foot into a stirrup, then swung a leg over. Remember, due north is the fastest way across the Blight. We will say our goodbyes there. With a final look back at my companions, I swigged the potion and activated stealth mode. Then we stepped out of the Instance and into the hell on Enora I'd created. The end.